Assalamu alaikum. Welcome today to this panel. We are going to discuss a topic. It's the last panel of our series on different topic on technology investments and different markets. I'm glad to be accompanied with different people, bringing different perspective. Tarneem Saeed from Cashi, Mohamed from NilPay, and Ahmed Babiker from BlueGamma. We'll be starting the session by asking each one of them introducing themselves, and then we'll get into Q&As. And then at the end, feel free to add your questions on the Q&A bar on Zoom, and then we will take some of them at the end, inshallah. So the purpose of this panel is to talk about financial inclusion and fintech, specifically in Sudan, and talking about different players that tried different approaches. How did the conflict affected the markets? How these markets are being reshaped again, and what's still yet to be built on top of that? We need a financial infrastructure first. The financial infrastructure will create payments, will create lending, will create remittance, will create different approaches. And then there is data we could even monetize and create more businesses on top of that. The conflict and the war in Sudan also created a new market, different challenges. And hopefully we get to hear about people that had been in the industry for 15, 20 plus years combined, and they did a lots of mistakes and learnings, but also great successes as well. So we would learn from that and maybe put some ideas for anyone who want to start a new business in the sector. What's really missing in the financial technology sector and what the country need on a local level, but maybe also on a regional level. So allow me to start by asking each one of them to introduce themselves. Maybe you could start by Tarneem, Mohamed, and then Ahmed.
Thank you, Ahmed. It's a real pleasure to be here today. Thank you to 249 for everything that you guys do to try and push our entrepreneurial ecosystem. So my name is Tarneem Saeed. I'm the CEO of Cashi, which is a fintech in Sudan. It's a merchant-led distribution network, and then we have layered on top of it a mobile money consumer wallet called My Cashi.
Thank you, Tarneem. Mohamed? I think you are muted.
Sorry, guys. Yeah. My name is Mohamed Ahmed. I'm the commercial director of NilPay with 25 years experience in sales and marketing in different sectors, telecom, Zain, MTN, and Bank of Khartoum, and some project regarding the cash disposable for the beneficiaries in Sudan regarding Samarat time, and some projects with IFC and World Bank in customer and agent acquisition for MTN mobile money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohamed. Last but not least, Ahmed.
Thanks for having me on, Ahmed, and thanks to 249 as well for having me on. So I'm Ahmed Babiker. I'm co-founder of a company called BlueGamma. We are a B2B market data platform. We're used by lenders, investors, corporates to price interest rate and financing risk. We're based in London, and I'd say most of my perspective today comes from seeing how institutional users use data to make investment decisions.
Thank you, Ahmed. I think going to be a good discussion, inshallah. I would start maybe by setting the context and maybe starting with you, Tarneem. Cashi had been operating for quite a time, and before the conflict, and after the conflict, and during the conflict as well. So different learnings, different stuff. Maybe just taking a step back and asking, basically what Cashi do is that you guys do turn merchants and small business into financial access points, so that they allow the cash in, the cash out, and the different services through that. Why is that the distribution for these agents and these sales points and access points, and not the technology is the real bottleneck, and specifically in markets like Sudan. So maybe starting by giving that background on Cashi, where you are at the moment, maybe answering this question, because a lot of people go and build apps, fintech apps, but that doesn't necessarily mean it will build a good fintech business.
Thank you, Ahmed. Yes, I smiled when I saw this question. Because I think that's often, I get this all the time in Sudan. Why has Cashi been able to work when others haven't? Even though at the end of the day, the technology may not seem very dissimilar. But I think it's exactly that. It is the distribution, it is the operation that goes behind it. It is extremely easy in this day and age. I mean, you can use AI to build an app, or to build a website. But if you want it to reach people, you have to distribute it. And I think, especially in markets like Sudan, I mean, put it this way: today we're sitting in a country where mobile phone penetration, as we understand it, has dropped from 70% pre-war to like 40%, right? The vast majority of people are not online. They're not scrolling through their LinkedIn or their X accounts or on Facebook, a little bit of Facebook, a little bit of WhatsApp. But in order to reach them, you have to basically find them face to face on the ground. And so this is where distribution is absolutely key, both on the merchant and the consumer side. You've got to go to people where they are, wherever they may be in their technology journey, and meet them there, and then provide a product that has PMF, so that fits their needs at that point. And I think really this is basically the biggest differentiator. I mean, yes, okay, our technology is quite advanced. It's very scalable. Our backend is very, very robust. But I think the biggest difference between us and other players in the market is that we just have invested extremely heavily. I mean, the overwhelming bulk of the money that has come in has been invested in that distribution angle. And you do need substantial amounts of money to be able to build it at scale and then to maintain it. And we'll talk about the quality aspect later. So yeah, so to answer your question, 100% distribution is key. And or frankly, it's something most people don't want to take on, not banks, not telcos, because it is an absolute pain and a half. But that's all we do is distribution. And so, we've kind of become quite specialized in that, I could say.
Thank you for that. I will take that to Mohamed. And for years, you had been working in aged generation, either in teleco or WFP, World Bank, cash programs. Can you give us a little bit of background about what have you seen across these different years, when running Thamarat, or the type of challenges, also connecting to what Tarneem mentioned, and how Sudan is as a country from your experience in the previous years?
Sorry, I am mute. For that, I will do two separation of the distribution. There is the agent and merchant acquisition task. The agent that they can provide the customer with the cash in, cash out scenarios, and the merchant acquisition that they can accept the payments through this digital channels or something like that. So there is a difference between what happened in telecom and what happened in, because at that time telecom are selling service like their airtime, and this could like create another sector of airtime market, and this is something different. I don't need to talk about it right now. And the banking, they provide different service, and definitely Cashi now in the market are providing different service. So yeah, independent of the service that you are providing, and how is the agent and merchant are like that service, and they earn some money or commission from it. So yeah, Samarat is different because this is like distribution money for the beneficiaries, and they just have one channel at that time, is cash out. So yeah, independent on agent and merchant, what they are doing and what they are using the airtime or the digital payment for, or the digital money for. Yeah, I think I answer your question, Ahmed. Yeah, different between telecom and banking and fintech also.
Yes, thank you, Mohamed. I will switch to you, Ahmed, and you do work on a different layer. You need financial infrastructure to be there. There is transactions. and there is data, and then on top of data, you provide different services that help institutions, financial institutions in credit scoring, and could be used in lending, etc. Can we explain from your that perspective what BlueGamma do, and also at the same time, if we were to build on what we see today in Sudan in terms of gaps in infrastructure and challenges, what type of other fintechs that are not infrastructure related we could build, and more people could actually build to solve different problems.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I can probably talk about this more from a what I see on the institutional side, and try and link that into things that I think that, you know, companies, whether it's in Sudan or emerging markets in general, can do. I'll also talk more from a lending perspective, because that's where most of our data sits. So if you look at the world of lending, for example, there are two types of risks involved with lending. There's kind of counterparty risk, and there is market risk. So counterparty risk being how risky is this person to lend to, market risk being how risky is the market. Now, if you look at fintechs in general in emerging markets, and this might be true for Sudan as well, you guys are probably more familiar with it than I am. I think fintechs have been quite good at looking at data, for example, for counterparty risk, things like credit scoring, looking at repayment behaviors, looking at other credit signals. And I think that's been hugely important for deciding who to lend to, especially in markets like Kenya and Nigeria, where things like credit histories haven't been available in the past. I think where there's a lot to learn from institutional players, and I think this can be applied to kind of fintechs, smaller fintechs, is how they handle market risk. So we see it, especially those operating at a larger scale, for example. So just to give you an example, we work with a very large automotive company in Canada, and what they do is, as they go through the day, they look at what the market's interest rates are at that particular point in time, and use that to update their pricing on throughout the day, because their kind of the cost of their product depends on financing costs. Now, one of the challenges in emerging markets and a country like Sudan is data is just not that available. It's really hard to find the data, whether it's market level data, whether it's publicly available data. And I think it takes a lot of working with banks, with regulators, with public institutions to try and find that data and ensure that it's updated regularly.
Thank you, Ahmed. I will take that point of right. If we want to reverse the whole thing, we need to have institutions producing data, and then we need to build on top of that. I will go back to you, Tarneem. Back as well to Cashi, and maybe we are looking for you as well to give us overview on how does the market look like today in terms of volume, transactions, challenges. But the main question I would like to frame it here is, what did you learn when about trust in general, and when people working with you and customers trusting trusting Cashi, when financial institutions, banks are in themselves fragile or absent. And obviously, when the war did start in Sudan, quite a number of banks collapsed due to the damage, and also the companies in between. So it created pressure, but it also created demand, and possibly it created different stuff. The whole ecosystem changed. What did you learn from that, and what's your take on this throughout the previous months or years?
You know, I think trust in Sudan is one of the funniest things. It's the hardest thing to gain. It's the easiest thing to lose, which is pretty standard, I think, with payments across the world. But there's also like I haven't quite been able to there's no word to really describe it. There is this, sometimes I feel like people associate, for example, banks with the government and with the state. And so there remains this kind of trust in banks and in the state, which I find absolutely fascinating in light of the context and everything that has happened, including all the bank failures and collapses and blah, blah. And I think really, in many ways, I think it is because they represent the last of the institutions. And so people hold on to them as a way to hold on to the state and to hold on to kind of society and everything they knew. So it's been very interesting for us studying, how I think I guess ultimately it's quite sad because it makes me realize that the banks have, we as Cashi had to build trust from scratch. We were not a financial institution. We were just basically a payment rails. That's all we were. And then now obviously it's a very different thing. We are licensed, we have more money license. All accounts are secured in the same way and everything, but in fact probably secured more in a more robust manner than a bank account. But I think it was so interesting just watching banks who had this natural trust placed in them, not take advantage of that trust and in many ways often squander it, I think. So yes, I think the world changed very much with the war. I think people became open to new players coming into the market. What is again very sad is I think notwithstanding everything that's happened, trust today remains in cash. And I think if you'd watch the activities of people across the country, when they are sent money into a bank account, into a wallet, into whatever, the overwhelming majority of people, their first action will still be to cash that out. And so it just goes to show that we have a long way to go to build trust still. But, again, a security situation has given space, I think, for a more digitized economy. And I think we and others have stepped into that space and have tried to begun to persuade people to trust in digital money. And I think there has been progress on this front. But I guess I'm saying all of this because I think that I see a lot of discourse, especially on social media, about how Sudan has changed completely, the economy is completely digitized, and I think that is very much an elite perspective. I don't think it reflects the experience of the bulk of the population who still very much cling to cash. But I do believe that there has always been trust in the banks. I think that trust could come back. I think the telcos, it's more interesting because they have not positioned themselves as holders of money before, and so for them it's new. They have to build trust there. But the country is there is a lot of flux, and we will see where it all ends after the war.
Can I have a follow-on on that?
Yeah.
Like, what have you seen when it comes to even if people still obviously trust cash, but also with the security situation, with checkpoints, with different stuff that happened, people wanted more digital solutions, but it might not have been accessible or available fully. Do you think that did contributed of changing the market, at least for Cashi or also for others? What was the different behaviors that you have seen looking at the previous 2 years or 3 years?
No, and there is, I mean, for one, like, something like 75% plus of our users have never had a bank account. So their only wallet has been a Cashi wallet. So that alone is 75% of our user base that has come into the digitized world. And if you take that on a couple of million people, that's quite a lot. So that's I think a change we have seen. There is definitely an aspect of security and checkpoints and travel. And I think the acceptance of not traveling with money now and putting it into a wallet, that has, although I think that was always there before in airtime, right? People used to put their money in airtime when they were traveling, but I think partially it's because the ecosystem itself is not very nascent, and so it's still, one of the things we always have to educate people on is keep your money in a wallet, because why do you need to cash it out? And they'll come and say, well, I have to pay for something. Okay, but you can pay from it directly from the wallet, right? Because you can do, as Mohamed Ahmed was pointing out, the merchants can do acquisition, right, of a digital wallet. And so we've seen that it has grown very organically with Bankak in areas where there's no cash, right? So people had to pay Bankak. But I think, again, it's always felt like it's been done out of necessity and not out of a real absorption of the fact that you can literally pay from digital money to whatever merchant you're buying for. And we'll see if that behavior cements over time. I guess the reason I'm raising these skepticisms today is because what we've seen is in areas where cash began to return, that people would revert back to old behaviors. And so it just goes to show that, like, sometimes when you do things out of necessity, it's not necessarily behavior. It's not a deep behavioral change. You haven't learned to have trust. And so I think we have some way to go there.
Very interesting. Maybe coming back to you, Mohammed, like you did took part of different players, like you built it within telecom, you built it within banks, you saw it also from developmental point of view. And do you want to reflect on what Tarneem mentioned when it comes to people coming back? Still, cash is always a king. And what need to be done in your point of view to change that a bit by a bit? Is it businesses need to be built to help more merchants and more people accepting money? Is it more agents accessible? Is it awareness campaign? What do you see is still missing across all this?
All this, okay. First of all, I agree with Nina on that. Yeah, the people definitely will go back to cash if the cash available. And with all this condition, you said, yes, we have to work on that. But the things coming from the policy, from central bank policy, the cash out policy. So, yeah, whatever the lack of cash from the central bank point of view, that means the more success for digital payment and more success for. But if the cash coming back and they bring more cash, that definitely the people go back. I agree with Nina on that. The another facts are important, like increasing the number of agent, the merchant, and for me, I will add the supplier, the layers, the layers between the agent and the merchant and the big suppliers of the market. We call like the whole trader that they feed the market with necessary products. They need to accept payment also, digital payment. So the merchant have his money in his wallet, but he don't know where he can get his product. So his capital will go. So yeah, this is one of the important things I think it will be add to what the point you add, Ahmed. What you said, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe coming back to you as well, Ahmed. You earlier spoke about other stuff could be done like lending and etc. Now, let's imagine a farmer in Sudan would like to get finance from microfinance institution. With the current situation of Sudan, lending is been done traditionally. No credit scoring, no history, not a single data point that people would build on. So looking at that in reverse, what do you think that these lenders in between, this institution, microfinance institution, banks, or any institution provide lending to farmers, to businesses, need to do to attract institutional capital? And what is the role that you see this data infrastructure layer able to play in that transition? Basically, if we were to look 3-4 years from now, what need to be done today, for example, to build that layer while the others are building the infrastructure?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And again, I'll try and speak for the institutions rather than the farmer themselves. So just seeing how institutional capital flows, just from a very high level. If you think about an institution, an opportunity might be flagged, and then the next step is they evaluate an opportunity. Then at some point there is an investment committee. At some point there is due diligence. That money then flows into wherever a lender, that then flows into the farmer. Now, every single step of that decision making process, there is data involved, and that data all lives in, whether it's spreadsheets or charts or PowerPoints. And if data can't kind of populate a spreadsheet, then kind of institutional capital from an investment committee, a decision is just not going to be made at an investment committee level. So I think anyone who is looking to attract institutional capital needs at some point to be collecting data. And that doesn't just happen overnight. You don't just, turn on a tap and say, oh, I'm going to store all of my data. It's something that just happens over time. And usually there needs to be some kind of top-down approach to kind of making sure that you store all of your data. Now, when it comes to decisions around institutional capital, if the data is good, then that means any kind of investment decision, lending decision is it's current. It is based on data from recently. It's defensible as well. So an institution can say, we lent to this person or lent to this fintech, and we based our assumptions on this. Now, if the data is not good, then decisions are just going to be slow, and also they are. If they fail, it's not necessarily because it was a bad investment decision. It is sometimes just because that investment was just not modelable. So yeah, I think just kind of starting to think about data earlier is really key for whether it's a lender or anyone operating in the investment space. Now, in some markets, it's easier to find the data. In some markets, it's harder to find the data. So stepping away from lending in particular, one of the things we see often is we'll be working with a customer who is based in, let's say, the Middle East, and they are looking to invest in a market somewhere in Africa. One of the first things they look for is lending data, so borrowing costs in that country. It is surprisingly hard in some countries to just find the borrowing costs, to just Google the borrowing costs for a particular country. There was a recent report by the OECD on the state of African capital markets, and one of their key results was that data was key in corporate debt markets. And I don't think that's just true for corporate debt markets. It's true for all markets in general, if lending is involved. Another couple of quick examples, actually. Ghana has an open data initiative, which means that any fintech who is looking to lend can just go on their page and look at current borrowing costs. The last time I looked, it was a bit stale. I think it hadn't been updated for a while, but at least the data is there. I know Egypt does well with it as well. So yeah, I think kind of again, I'm the data person taking it back to data. I think data is key. It's not just a tap that's switched on overnight. It's something that happens over time.
Yes, and I completely agree. I think that's important for institutions, giving lending, for insurance businesses. And if you really need to step up that, we need to build that second layer. Mohammed, building also on Tarneem point on people still unbanked and underbanked, it's still massive number in Sudan. Give it be farmers, give it be individuals, people don't trust banks, people never even heard about bank, or even people that taking a car or taking transportation to reach a branch for the bank is actually could be more expensive in Sudan these days than actually the amount of money that they are going to receive. How we are able to reach these segments, these different segments, what type of different business models and fintechs and businesses, tech businesses on fintech and even non-tech business we need, just to throw some ideas. So we see people taking that as opportunities and maybe try to see what could be built to reach the unbanked and the underbanked, but also at the same time provide more data to Ahmed's point.
Okay. The data still will be a problem after we finish all these sessions. The data is the big problem in Sudan, all the situation. Okay. Maybe I speak in Arabic a little, so I make my point clear on that. The people don't like the bank because they didn't like the way that they're keeping their money in someone's hand and they don't have really access to their money. ممكن تجربة كانت في سوق ليبيا مثلا، يعني يمكن ما كانت قصة دي قصه حقيقيه يعني. الناس زي بيحفروا بيدفنوا قروشهم تحت الواطه، احسن له مما يشيل يديها البنك. فهو داير تواكسس قروشه دي في اي وقت، وما داير اي ستريكتد ولا البنك قفل ولا البنك فتح لاسباب كثيره. هم تجار عندهم سبلاير دايرين قروشهم في اي وقت، فكانوا بيستعملوا الطريقه دي. فواحده من الحاجات بالاضافه انه فتحنا مثلا برانشز للبنك في المنطقه المعينه، كترنا البرانشز، عملنا كاش كولكشن اند كاش ديستريبيوشن. يعني هو داير قروشه في اي وقت ممكن يضرب تليفون نسحب له ونجي نسلمه كاشه في دكانه، وهو يوقع على انه استلم الكاش حقه من حسابه. اجين نحن عشان نقدر نقفل قصه الكاش اوت دي وانه الناس تتعامل بكاش، كل الشانلز should be digitalized. انا ما بتكلم عن الريتيل ولا بتكلم عن الجمله مثلا تجار الجمله ولا البيج سبلايرز. حتى الفارمرز هو داير الكاش لشنو؟ عشان يشتري احتياجاته اليوميه اللي هو ما بيقدر يشتريها بالوالد او بالديجيتال. يعني احنا هنشوف احتياجاته اللي هو بيحتاج يطلع لها الكاش دي، المفروض تبقى ديجيتالايز يعني باي ديتيلز زي دي. يعني داير يشتري، ما اقدر اخش في تفاصيل، لكن وات ايفر دي اللي بتخلي الناس ما قادره. The people they don't trust the banks because they don't have the access to the bank. smartphone has to be الابلكيشن. دي مشكله كبيره، ما كل السودانيين عندهم سمارت فون. اليو اس اس دي كامينج سون، احنا سمعنا الحاجه دي لكن ما شفناها لسه. دي will increase definitely السيجمنت اوف البيبلز اللي هيستعملوا الخدمه دي. مور خدمات، مور براكتس لديجيتال، هي بتخلي الناس ما دارين يطلعوا كاشون. يهو مشاكل بتاعت السكيورتي ودي نحن بنساعده، لكن وانس انه ما في خدمات هو ضايق حيضطر يمشي يطلع قروش وكاش عشان يشتري بالكاش. بالاضافه اللي في تو ديفرنت برايسنج. انا برضو بفتكر انه يخلوا مثلا سعر الحاجه اللي بالديجيتال ارخص من سعر الحاجه اللي بالكاش مثلا. دي one of the ways that to push the people انه يستعملوا ديجيتال الرخصه. يعني زمان في التليكوم كانت نافعانا، مثلا كانت البرسنتج اوف الكاش 10%. فنحن as a banking we play on some little percentage so we get some margin. Nina, I think you were having this is the difference. هو ده الفرق يعني بين كل ماركت وماركت.
Yes. Any reflections, Tarneem?
No, you know what, Mohamed, actually, when CBOS, when they put the restrictions on the cash out, when the policy changed, okay, around cash to support digitization, and basically because there was a lack of physical currency, we were the first to put up our hands and say, this is going to create a black market for cash, and this is going to push people away from digitization. Because that's exactly, you made exactly the point that if I don't trust that I can get my money out and or into the wallet, and particularly out of the wallet easily, or the bank account, I will not put it in, right? Or I'll put in only what I have to put in. And this is the biggest problem we have at the moment, and we've been facing over the past year. And actually, we've modified our strategy very much specifically to address this point, because we think if we can avail enough places around the country where we can do cash out easily, where there's a guarantee of cash out, we can begin to change behavior. But of course, the problem is we're trying to do it at a time when there is no cash. So the cash doesn't sit within the banks. So we can't take the cash from the banks to then keep it to distribute it as almost as agents for the banks or the telcos, okay, to do cash out. And so we have to go and find our cash to then do kind of, which is in a scarce economy, which makes the whole thing very difficult. And as you say, Mohamed, the cost of cash makes it extremely problematic. So it's actually, I wish that the central bank, and there are many voices within the central bank actually who I think do understand this and who share our opinion on it. But it was also, I guess, the necessity of having to change the currency and whatnot. But for sure, the areas where there is a shortage of cash, the trust in digitization, I think, is much, much harder to achieve.
Yeah.
And I will just add also something on the data. Ahmed, I actually think there's quite a lot of data available now in Sudan. I mean, for example, we have quite a lot of data now. And we've been looking at ways that we can start using our data to deliver more services. And there again, you run into another interesting problem around policy. Because actually, although pre-war, there was a lot of discussion and conversation and changes in policy to enable more flexible lending. So, for example, by moving away from purely Sharia and opening up conventional windows, by revising the microfinance terms and conditions, blah, blah, blah. I think it was not really, because it was very much just before the war, it wasn't carried through, and also with the changes of government. And I think one of the things today, one of the fastest ways actually to get people to put money into digital or to have digital money is if they can lend against it, or sorry, borrow against it rather. But you can't get them to borrow against it because the whole structure of microfinancing today is so limited, and you can basically really only finance like farmers basically for crop purchases. Yeah, and it's quite hard to find another use case that works easily under today's quite restrictive ruling. So that's another area I think that the government should start revising if they get around to it.
It's very interesting to get into the deeper stuff. Maybe as well with you, Tarneem. Taking a step back and maybe looking at all the journey of Cashi, and if you were to rebuild Cashi again from zero today, what infrastructure layer basically would you prioritize first, and why? And the reason I'm asking this is because I think the whole market is, to your point, it didn't change, behavior didn't change, but players changed, decentralization also changing, and a lot of policies as well as coming in. Ministry of Data Transformation did announce USSD will be open to banks. So there is different stuff today that were not there a few years ago. So what would you rebuild again, and why? Yani? I think that's the main point here.
With our team, we're often doing this. What would we have changed? What would we do again if we went into a new market? How would we approach it? I think the world that we started in was so incredibly different to the world of today. So when we started, there was card acceptance, there was a national switch, right? And in a really important part of Kashi's value add was placing POSs with merchants, so merchants could accept cards from anyone and get instant settlement. The transaction went through, the fees were clear, and all of that got wiped out. The interoperability that the national switch, however problematic EBS was, the interoperability that it provided was absolutely key for Sudan. And I think the biggest loss that we had as a country was the loss of EBS. That, and by the way, also the electronic check clearing system. Okay, because what it meant was that all of a sudden you had to choose very carefully which bank you put your money into, or which whatever wallet, bank, whatever. I mean, there wasn't really many other wallets pre-war, because once it's in there, you can't get it out. There's no cash to get it out in, right? And you can't transfer it anywhere. I mean, Siraj didn't come back until very late in the war, and it's very expensive, and it's impossible basically for an individual to do. And so, I think, sorry to finish that point. So then what happened is that people were like, okay, well, I can only put my money into the one bank that is most widely accepted and is the easiest to transfer money in and out of the country from, for example, and all these other factors. And that really caused that concentration. So when I look back at our journey, I don't think we would have changed. I think everything we did was right for the time. As in, I don't think it would have made sense to start tackling some of the things that we are tackling now before the war, because before the war, the infrastructure was different. The layout of the country was different. There was less consolidation in one entity. The one thing maybe possibly that we could have changed a little bit is perhaps to have prepared a little bit earlier for a consumer side. I think we came late into the consumer game. Although we launched Cashi in 2023, we launched a bit just as a response to the war and to provide a need, where I don't think we had a clear consumer strategy. And I think it's taken us a couple of years to start building that strategy and understand consumers and understand who we're trying to reach and why. Maybe we could have started that earlier. But again, when we started, we were not going to do consumer. And I remember telling the banks and the telcos we were not going to do consumer because we had so much to do on the merchant side, and we still have so much to do on the merchant side. So I hope that in a long-winded way, Ahmed, I answered your question. But I think, really today, the problem is there's no infrastructure. There's absolutely no infrastructure in Sudan. Your most basic of telecom connectivity is not barely existent. Your electricity is missing. So everything has to be built and built again. And I'm not sure that trying to build any of it earlier would have made sense. The question going forward becomes, what role will players like us have in availing the basic infrastructure? So, for example, how would we be supporting connectivity? How will we be supporting electricity? I'm not sure that I have the answers to those questions yet, but if we continue in this manner with where the country is going, I think you will find private sector having to step in more and more to avail the basics. Never mind USSD and all of these things, because even USSD, if you have no phone connectivity, it's not going to work either.
Yes, that's true. And as you mentioned, like it's completely different structure and of weighing also the way to develop this business as well. And speaking about developing and building, maybe coming to you, Ahmed, and we'll take a slightly different point. Let's assume the infrastructure improved a bit. Let's assume a bit more data started. The data that Tarneem spoke about somehow made it to open platform, and you could just connect with it with APIs and etc. It always comes an issue of building in context of Sudan, less capital, no access to VCs, no access to investors, big risk. How would people also reflect on your experience building these ventures with a very, very limited resources, maybe also very limited access to good talents that are able to build as well? How would you look into that from that perspective of data and capital?
Yes, I guess your question more, if you wanted to build these types of business, how would you with limited resources? Yeah, cool. Yeah, I guess before I go into that, it's Tarneem, it's a really interesting point that you made, that you can have all of the data in the world, but if you don't have the policy that allows you to use that data, then there is no point in that data. And then, yeah, the second interesting observation I've made just listening to this all is fintech is rarely just about the software itself. There is so much behind the scenes. For typical software, you just, I guess these days you can vibe code something and push it out. But fintech, there is all of this stuff happening in the background, especially somewhere like Sudan. But yeah, I think these days building something in general, whether it's fintech or outside of fintech, it is so much easier. Especially with AI, you can do a lot more with less resources. Now, I can't claim that AI can go and build a fintech business in Sudan, but it can at least do the very early stages of stuff. And I think one of the key differences between now and a few years ago is it's probably a lot harder to raise capital in general. So, if you were starting a fintech business 5 years ago or so, you would set out and your first goal would be to go and speak to investors and try and raise funding. I think that's now changed, where when you start a business now, you need to go and find some traction, try and find some revenue. That is partly because it's easier to build now, but also partly because there is less money available to give to founders. So yeah, I think trying to do anything at the moment, not just fintech, I think tech in general. My word of advice would be try and focus on getting those early customers, getting that early revenue before going and trying to raise money, because it is much harder at the moment.
Thank you, Ahmed. I will take two last questions, one for Tarneem and one for Mohamed, and then we could take Q&As from the audience. Build on the capital point, maybe Tarneem. Cashi was one of the first, and actually the first to raise a quite big investment round that also, in a way, put a different narrative on Sudan in the media and everyone, and had different regional players as well involved into that investments. How would you look at it now, even with the war that happened, and even more challenges, damaging infrastructure? Would you still see raising capital, and does Cash still need capital look at it, look at it in that way, and what lessons basically we would get out of that, that other people could also learn from when trying to raise investment rounds for such a very complex country, or a market like Sudan.
Ahmed,
Yes.
sorry, my line dropped a little bit. So I just you were talking about raising of capital, and then did you say with the war? Just repeat that last
Yes.
sentence.
No, I said Cashi had been one of the first companies and started to raise capital and putting Sudan basically on the map. How do you see it now? Even the market became more complicated. Does it still, is it still, it's obviously harder, but like how we are now seeing it and what learnings people could get out of that. Should others still try to continue raise capital for such a market, specifically fintech? And what learnings you would get into that from that?
I mean, look, of course, people should still try and raise money. You don't give up hope completely, but it is obviously, I think, significantly harder to try and convince people to invest in Sudan, and specifically, just given everything that's happened. I think, we've continued to be able to raise funds through this, and I think it's mostly a testament to the Cashi team who have continued to build through the war and to achieve a lot and to deliver, a strong return to the community, I think, and to prove that the model is viable and scalable. And if it can survive a war, the hope then people think that, if it can survive a war, what will happen? We always said this to people that wanted, because I think always the risks with investing in these markets, and Ahmed will know this, Ahmed Babiker, which is, how do people get their money back, right? It's one thing to give money to something, even if there's growth potential, but what's the exit? And I think it's going to take some time for there to be more good exits. I think we need to see more exits. Business model that's fairly tried and it. If you're struggling to raise, maybe you need to go back to your business model and kind of demonstrate more clearly that it can yield tangible returns. Did you hear me okay? Sorry, it's this Egyptian connectivity. Okay.
No worries. It's a bit here and there. But just there was one last point, maybe if you can repeat. You did mention I think you were speaking about exits at the point, at the end, that investors are investing and they're looking for long-term, obviously, returns and exits at some point. And obviously, the fragility of the market of Sudan making it there's there is a risk, but a higher perceived risk into the country. Then what's your formula to navigate that? Like, how would you, maybe a follow-up question, how would you deal with investors? What type of techniques you would use to, at least, it's still risky, but still like manageable, or to some extent manageable? Is there any tricks you are using, tips?
I think you have someone on this call who could probably address it better, but I think Mohamed Isa. But I think the key thing is you can't get people to invest in Sudan on the back of an idea, right? Or on the back of, I rolled it out to a few people and it worked, right? I think you have to be able to demonstrate scale. And actually, with Cashi, even before we raised that seed round, because Alsoug had managed to prove that there was some need for digitization, one may say, and then we had done a lot of the groundwork for Cashi by the time we raised that round. So we were going out to people and being like, okay, we've already achieved X, Y, Z, now take a bet on us. And then, it was easier with Foley and others taking that bet. But I think the key thing I would say is, in these markets, you have to build a better business than you would build in Kenya, in Egypt, in Morocco, in anywhere else, because you've got to make up for the Sudan factor, basically. And frankly, that means usually making quite strong revenue quite early on and really showing just scale.
Makes sense. Thank you. Mohamed, one last question, and then we can take some questions from the audience. Yani, if you were to design new digital platforms today, in Sudan and an agent infrastructure from scratch, what layer would you prioritize first and why? Also, similar question to the one that Tarneem had, but also from your perspective, what's the layer you would focus on first today if you are rebuilding from scratch?
Sorry, I think I will go with the same answer with Tarneem. In Arabic لكل زمان مقال ولكل يعني it's very difficult but it's okay. انا داير اقول حاجه في الاول قبل كده ان احنا السودان عموما والفinTech ضيعنا زمن كتير في الفايتنج between it is a telecom business, it is a banking business. Tarneem, she has facing this problem, I think very clear. ف yeah, at that time I am one of the player. The things we will not go with this fight. ما هنمشي بالمعركة دي. مفروض كله يكون يعني حاسس الحمد لله الأمور بقت stable يعني بقى كله متاح لكله الحمد لله. لكن if at that time I am not going for this fight anymore. يعني كان أحسن من الأول. كل البلاينج يتعاونوا مع بعض كوبريت مع بعض كان بنكون in a better situation. انا ما حيكون عندي لاير واحد. يمكن شويه مع ترنيم مختلف لانه الرولز you have to find a customer merchant agent in the same time. يعني انا بالنسبه لي كزول شغال في الميرشن عشان تقنع التاجر ولا الكلاين انه يشتغل معاك. نحن شغالين ترانزاكشن بزنس بوينت اوف فيو. يعني more transaction he get more benefit he get more he enjoying the business more. ف يعني اقول هشتغل فيهم كلهم. ما هركز في اي واحد كاستمر عشان يجيبوا ترانزاكشن للميرشن عشان الميرشن يكون هابي وماني ميرشن عشان السبلاير الكبير يكون هابي عشان نعمل السيركل دي والايكو ده كله يكون مربط مع بعض. لازم كان يكون يعني ما اركز على جزء محدد واخلي جزء محدد. وطبعا بالكرنت سيتويشن ده USSD وان كان طبعا السودان وور ديفينتلي في مشاكل ظهرت. يعني القرارات الجديده بتساعد لكن ازات تايم لو كان جات القرارات دي مع السيتويشن اللي كان حاصل في السودان definitely الريزلت. Sudan start mobile money thinking and talking about since 2009. Yeah, it's very early. نحن بعد كينيا ب 2 years or 3 years starting talking about this mobile money business. لكن اهو it takes long time.
شكرا محمد. Thank you for all the panelists. I will take some of the questions from the audience. There is one question from Ahmed. In light of the geopolitical shift in the region, the war in Sudan, and emerging financial technologies, how fintech can provide value for investors and SMEs? I think this is more of a general question. Maybe Ahmed, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so just can you repeat the question? So the end of the question was how can
fintechs provide value for investors and SMEs within the context of the geopolitical shifts in the region?
I think Tarneem hit the nail on the head. I think ultimately, if you build a good business, you are providing value. If you focus on getting customers, building revenue, ultimately you are providing value to whether it's investors or your customers. It's very, very easy to say given everything that's happening in Sudan, but part of me also thinks that times of crisis like this could perhaps build more resilient businesses. Any business that comes out of this and has been able to survive is the most resilient of businesses. And so, yeah, I think just to summarize, I think if you're building a business that is providing revenues, providing value to its customers, then you're providing value to your investors.
Thank you, Ahmed. The second question from Abdul Rashid Saleh. How can we redesign financial rail to prioritize real economic activities, not just financial efficiency? Tarneem, want to take this?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it is about adding on more services, and this is, I guess, to my point earlier. Perhaps I wasn't making it very clear, but I think the problem with Sudan right now is that there's very little to sell. So in terms of payments, there's very little to offer and there's very little to sell. I think it's not about transfers, it's not about bill payment, it's about what else can we offer consumers. And I'm reading some of these comments, but exactly, someone made the point about we need a pull factor and not just a push. And I think basically, one of the things is I think financing is really important. I think it's particularly important in the course of a war when people have lost everything and what little working capital they would have had to run whatever small business. So being able to get financing to people in good terms is key. I think there are things like insurance for sure that should be being deployed. I mean, I think the most basic of things is, I think we need cards back in the country, and I'm not sure that Visa and MasterCard are necessarily the best. I can see that the market is being pushed a little bit into Visa, MasterCard, or Visa particular market. The problem is Visa is very, very expensive. And I don't think that works for the average person in Sudan. And so, we've been waiting and asking and pushing for the banks to bring back their cards and wondering if we're going to get a card switch back. But I think that's absolutely key. Again, and particularly if you're in a point of time where 40% of people only have a phone, right? And of those 40%, how many have a good phone as well? So I think a card can be a very, very useful formula. There are lots of other things as well that you can offer. Ease of remittances is, again, something I think the government can help facilitate. You can get into commercial kind of marketing stuff like discounts and loyalty programs and all of that. But again, I just think there are some very, very basic things that are missing that could be deployed first.
Thank you. I have been moderating 2 panels before. This is the largest amount of questions I had, which is good, Yani. I will try to take different type of questions. So there is a question from Akram, basically speaking about the Ministry of Digital Transformation and introduction of USSD and etc. And the question, there's 2 questions. The first one is, given that people don't trust digital financial systems, if there is a possibility for a backlash to credit scoring system from the public, and if so, how do you see that could play out? The second one was, if this digital financing initiatives start to come into effect, how do you expect the business and financing landscape to shift? So, summarize, I think one question is about if people doesn't trust financial systems, how we would expect them to trust credit scoring systems, and would be any pushback from the market. I'm not sure if anyone had the exposure before in Sudan, particularly to lending activities. Yeah, Tarneem?
I know, Ahmed, I'm going to adjust that one is really important on trust in the government again. I think you will find that in parts of the country that have been safe during the war, people will partake in the new digital schemes, which is essentially like a digital ID and whatnot. I think we will begin to see real problems when we push into parts of the country where there has not been as much stability, where the government has not been as constant, and where there is a real lack of trust in, well, why are you taking? Because we've seen this a lot, even as we've been tackling KYC on Cashi, as well, why do you need our KYC? Who are you? Are you going to shut off our bank account or shut off our access to our money? And I think, unfortunately, again, another negative consequence of the war, because war brings necessarily a very securitized state, meaning that everyone is on full high alert at all times, and money gets caught up in that. And so you've seen, for example, laws have been passed that have given the pre-war, you needed literally basically a judge had to sign off on a warrant before you could freeze an account, right? Today, I don't know how many bodies in government can, it seems like just some random person can freeze an entire account of someone, and it can stay frozen for days, and the burden is on you to go and then defend your account, just holding your account, right? And so this has created a real lack of trust in government, and I worry, and unfortunately, we've seen that being used, particularly, for example, the areas around Kordofan have faced more of that. Money flows from there have been more suspect. And so we will see, I think, that when the government tries to push out digital IDs to those parts of the country where there has been less of a state and less stability, and where these tools to trace money laundering and arms financing and whatnot have been used more aggressively, I think we will see. I mean, is whoever raised this point, I can't see it in the chat, I think you raise a really good point, and I think this is going to be a big part of the post-war battle to kind of stabilize the country and rebuild the trust between government and people.
Thank you for taking that, Tarneem. Maybe this question could be for you, Mohammed. Nishwa is asking, do you see a risk in rebuilding financial infrastructure without tackling financial literacy first? And what role do you think financial institutions should play in closing that gap of that financial literacy?
Sorry, I think will not be that major thing. The main issue is the policy, the central bank policy and the government policy. This is the main factors at helping that financial inclusion running well. Is coming from not from the player. We are willing to play any roles, but the things like now the Ministry of the Telecom, they announced that the USSD is available, but the reality is not available in the telecom right now. They're not providing this service for private. So yeah, this is the main thing that the government or the central bank and the Ministry of Telecom should be more involved on that, and this will push more than the. This is from my point of view. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Another question from Rayan. Given that currently many NGOs are doing cash assistance, including digital cash transfers, which play a role in financial inclusion, would it be possible for fintech maybe partner with them? And what impact can we anticipate from this partnership? I think this is something already happening. Tarneem, want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So we've been doing distributions across the country since fairly early on in the war. I mean, we're expecting to be doing a lot more of them next year. It's it's so sad because one, there's not as much money coming into. I mean, there's the overall problem with Sudan and the generally not enough aid money coming in right now. So I think that's a really big issue, and we've seen some partners just not have funds anymore to deploy. And then I think in other places, another limitation rather is that coming back to the issue with phones, right? A lot of people don't have phones anymore. They tend to be the people at the lower levels who need the aid the most. And so we've been exploring and experimenting with a whole bunch of different things, including vouchers and whatnot. But again, there's cash shortages, and so it's come down to literally for every area we have to solve based on what's available in the area, what the beneficiaries look like. It should be, so to answer your question, it should be being used a lot more. Fintechs should be at the front line deploying this. And by fintechs, I mean, I would almost say the fintech aspects of banks as well as telcos, as well as pure fintechs like us. I think unfortunately there are bigger macro pictures that are limiting very much the scalability of this right now, and I'm hoping that they will be overcome over the next couple of years, but we'll see.
Thank you. Another question from Mohamed Isa. Maybe you can take this, Mohamed. What do you need from the regulator to ensure fintech succeed, especially since the telco could use their vast resources to subsidize the customer acquisition?
Yes, they support. They know the central bank and the Ministry of Telecom. They know the problem of the Sudan very clear, and we need their support. We need their input in the market. We need them to enforce the players. Actually, they need enforce. The big players, they don't need to. I don't need to mention them, but yeah, they need to. We need to have the government power here.
Okay. Maybe one last question. It's a bit different question from Mohammed. How do you maintain user trust when one small issue could make people revert back to cash? Can we link their e-cash with insurance as example to increase trust?
That one's for me, I guess. I'm thinking I love that idea of can you basically insure against them reverting to cash. I think the trick really is just to make sure there's enough cash, because if there's enough cash, then the cost of cash goes down, which means that you can cash out well, okay, so just so people are aware, today, if you go to a bank and you try and cash out, you're limited to like 200,000, or whatever the current limit is, okay, which is really not very much at all. So then you have to cash out basically any substantial amount in the market. And then it's kind of it's not your luck, but it's the cost of cash in your area. And you could be paying up to 10, 15% to cash out that amount, that money. So I just think at the end of the day, actually, unfortunately, we need more cash so that people feel comfortable, so that there is more capacity to then do cash out, which means then that people are more comfortable that they can cash out, which would hopefully mean that then they would keep the money in the wallet, combined with what we were discussing earlier, which a few of you have raised, the pull strategy, like incentives to keep money in. By the way, another thing in Sudan, which is very different to other markets, you can't, there isn't really savings. So if you put money into a wallet, if it's a mobile money wallet like Cashi, you basically can't get anything against it in the forms of any reward for keeping that money in there. I mean, the term in another market would be interest, but there's nothing else equivalent that you can give. And so then again, the question comes, well, am I best keeping the money in my wallet when it's just sitting there and when there's crazy inflation and devaluation of the currency, or should I take it out cash and instead buy gold or sesame or something else or a car or whatever? So I think there's the whole macro ecosystem needs to be reassessed a little bit. And Mohamed Ahmed, I'm sure will have something to say on this one.
Yeah, I just want to clear that the insurance thing regarding the e-money, definitely like the bank, the fintech company, like the same like the bank, we have a liquidity with the central bank. We are not allowed to use that liquidity to secure the customer balance. So there is the insurance here from the central bank rules. You are not allowed, and if the money, for example, go from his wallet for mistake or something, this is guarantee his money is getting back. But if he is his fault, so there is no guarantee here. The same like the rules for the banks. This is only for the insurance thing.
Thank you so much. Also want to thank everyone that attended with us. Lots of questions, but we are on time. Inshallah, we get to bring them all again for next time. I'd like to thank all the panelists, Mohamed, Tarneem, Ahmed, for your time. I think it was great conversation, and people did enjoy it. From them, I still have 7 questions unanswered. So thank you again, and inshallah, we get to have you all back. Any final remarks or comment from any one of you before we close up?
I'll just say, Ahmed, it's so nice that you are bringing all of us together. This is clearly a community of people who are all very interested in this space. And I hope to have more discussions because there's lots of nice ideas coming out as well. And we all need ideas in the middle of this war. So thank you to 249.
Same from my side. Yeah, love what you guys are doing at 249. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Tarneem. Ahmed.
شكرا يا شباب. Nice to meet you all.
شكرا لك محمد. شكرا لكم جميعا ومع السلامة. السلام عليكم.